My parents always said, family means sacrifice. I didn't realize they meant mine. I'm 29 and 5 years ago I would have laughed if someone told me I'd end up in court against my own family over $500,000. We looked normal from the outside. Sunday dinners. Birthday cards from my mom with terrible jokes inside. My dad giving me his old toolbox when I moved into my first apartment. The kind of family people assume is solid. But somewhere between my sister Isla's endless dreams and my parents' obsession with protecting her, everything broke apart. I just didn't see it coming. Isla is 2 years younger than me. She's always had this way of moving through life like the world should rearrange itself for her. Every new interest became a life mission. 1 month it was opening a bakery. Then interior design. Then crystals, energy healing and manifestation. At 25 she announced she needed a peaceful home with space to align her energy. Thought she was kidding. My parents didn't. They nodded like it was completely reasonable for someone with no stable job, no savings and no plan to buy a house. I ignored it at first. I figured maybe they'd help her rent an apartment. Then my mom called one night. "Come for dinner Saturday," she said brightly. "We have something important to discuss." That should have been my warning. When families say, important discussion, it usually means the decision has already been made without you. I showed up with a bottle of wine expecting holiday plans or maybe another conversation about Isla's latest phase. Instead, dinner looked like a celebration. Roast chicken, candles, wine already poured. Isla was glowing. Dad smiled and patted the chair beside him. "We've got exciting news." Mom handed me a thick envelope. "We bought Isla a house." I blinked. "You what?" Isla practically bounced in her seat. "It's perfect. 3 bedrooms, little garden, 10 minutes from my yoga studio." Something already felt wrong. Then Mom added casually, "It's technically in both your names." My stomach dropped. Dad leaned forward like he was explaining a smart investment. "Your credit is excellent. Isla's isn't there yet, so the mortgage is under your name." I stared at him. The papers in my hand suddenly felt heavy. Mortgage agreements, loan documents, cosigner forms. All prepared. All waiting for my signature. "You want me to take out a mortgage for her?" Mom smiled gently like I was overreacting. "It's just paperwork." That phrase lit something hot inside me. Just paperwork. Just $500,000 attached to my name. Just risking everything I'd spent years building. I looked around the table in disbelief. These were the same parents who refused to help me pay for college because I needed to learn responsibility. The same people who made me work 2 jobs while studying. The same people who told me taking loans was part of becoming an adult. I worked my way into a stable tech career because I had no choice. Now that I'd finally built security for myself, they wanted to hand it to Isla. "I'm not signing this," I said. Isla rolled her eyes immediately. "Wow. So much for being the responsible one." Dad's voice hardened. "You wouldn't have anything without us." Mom added quietly, "Family helps family." "No," I said. "Family doesn't trap each other into debt." The rest of dinner collapsed after that. Isla cried. Mom called me selfish. Dad accused me of abandoning the family. I left before dessert. I honestly thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A few weeks later, a legal letter arrived at my apartment. My parents were suing me. According to them, I had already agreed to co-sign the mortgage and then backed out, causing financial damages. But that wasn't even the worst part. The house had already been purchased. In my name. I sat on the edge of my bed rereading the paperwork over and over, trying to understand how this was even possible. Turns out, they'd used an old power of attorney document I signed years earlier during college, mixed with forged paperwork, and somehow listed me as guarantor on the loan. Meanwhile, Isla was posting smiling selfies online from her new kitchen with captions like, "Manifestation works sparkles." I hired a lawyer the next morning. He was the kind of attorney who never smiled, which honestly made me trust him more. After reading everything, he leaned back and sighed. "This is bad," he said. "But not for you." The next few months were chaos. My credit was flagged. I had to freeze my accounts. I couldn't apply for a mortgage of my own while the case was active. Every family event became unbearable. At Easter, my mom cornered me in the kitchen while everyone else ate dessert. "You could end this any time," she whispered. "Just do the right thing." I laughed in her face before I could stop myself. Because for the first time I finally understood something. They didn't think they had done anything wrong. To them I was just the dependable child. The stable one. The one expected to sacrifice quietly while Isla chased fantasies. And when I refused, I became the villain. That realization hurt more than the lawsuit ever did. It was either laugh or scream. The court date finally came and I walked in wearing the best suit I owned. My lawyer had prepared me for every possible outcome, but nothing could have prepared me for seeing my parents sitting across the courtroom like they were the victims. My mother looked exhausted. My father looked irritated. And Isla sat behind them in a pale pink blouse, scrolling through her phone like this was an inconvenience instead of a disaster. Then the judge walked in. Middle-aged. Sharp eyes. The kind of face that looked impossible to fool. He spent several long minutes reading through the paperwork while the courtroom stayed completely silent. My heartbeat was so loud I could hear it in my ears. Finally, the judge looked up. First at my parents, then at their lawyer. And calmly asked one question. If the defendant never signed these documents, he said, tapping the file with his pen, and you admit the paperwork was completed before he even saw it, what exactly is this claim based on? Their lawyer froze. Chilly froze. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. And in that moment something shifted. Not just in the courtroom. Inside me too. For the first time since this nightmare started, I realized they might actually lose. The silence stretched painfully. My parents still didn't seem to understand how bad things had become. Mom kept glancing nervously at their attorney. Dad sat stiff and stubborn, arms crossed like confidence alone could fix this. But the judge had already seen through them. He leaned forward slightly. You are asking this court, he said carefully, to enforce a $500,000 financial obligation against someone who never signed the mortgage, never verbally agreed to it, and whose information was used through an outdated power of attorney intended for an unrelated matter. Their lawyer tried to respond. We have witness statements. From whom? The judge interrupted sharply. The lawyer hesitated. The co-beneficiary. The sister currently living in the property. The judge slowly turned toward Isla. She gave a tiny awkward wave like she was introducing herself at a school meeting. The judge stared at her for a second before looking back at the lawyer. So your primary witness, he said flatly, is the person benefiting from the alleged fraud. No one answered. My lawyer didn't even speak. He just leaned back in his chair and let the judge continue. What I see here, the judge said slowly, is entitlement, manipulation, and potentially criminal conduct. My mother went pale. Dad shifted in his seat for the first time all morning. The lawyer raised his hands slightly. Your Honor, perhaps we could request additional time. No, the judge snapped. His voice cracked through the courtroom. You have wasted this court's time with a case that appears fraudulent on its face. He tapped the file again. Unless you can provide actual evidence within the next 5 minutes proving the defendant knowingly accepted this debt, I'm prepared to dismiss this case immediately. Their lawyer looked physically sick. He turned toward my parents, whispering furiously. Mom started panicking. Dad still looked angry more than worried. And suddenly I understood something about him that I never fully understood before. In his mind, family meant ownership. If he raised me, he owned part of my future. My success belonged to him. My credit belonged to him. My life belonged to the family if they decided they needed it. That realization made me feel strangely calm. The judge stood. I'll give counsel 5 minutes to confer. The courtroom buzzed quietly as my parents huddled with their attorney. Isla sat alone behind them, staring at her phone. No apology. No shame. Just annoyance that her perfect little dream house was falling apart. My lawyer leaned toward me quietly. They're going to fold, he murmured. And honestly, they should. I didn't answer. I was too busy grieving something I hadn't fully admitted yet. Not the money. Not the lawsuit. My family. The judge returned a few minutes later. Are the plaintiffs proceeding? Their lawyer stood slowly. After reviewing the circumstances, he said carefully, the plaintiffs wish to withdraw their claim. The judge nodded once. Case dismissed. That was it. Just 2 words. But it felt like finally breathing after months underwater. As everyone started standing, my mother rushed toward me. Alex, please, she whispered desperately, grabbing my arm. You don't understand the pressure we've been under. I pulled my arm free. No, I said quietly. I understand perfectly. She looked stunned. You stopped seeing me as your son a long time ago, I continued. I was just the responsible one. The backup plan. Dad didn't apologize. He just stared at me like I had betrayed them. Like I was the reason any of this happened. Behind him, Isla opened her mouth like she wanted to say something. Maybe an apology. Maybe another excuse. I never found out. I walked right past her. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and let the silence settle around me. I had lost my family. Or maybe I had finally accepted the truth about the family I actually had. And underneath all the exhaustion and anger, there was something unexpected. Relief. Because for the first time in months, my life belonged to me again. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise and sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and my laptop open. Every document was still there. The forged signatures. The fake agreements. The mortgage paperwork. The records showing exactly what they had done. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was fraud. And I was done protecting people simply because we shared DNA. I drafted an email to my lawyer with one subject line. Next steps. Then I attached everything. Every file. Every screenshot. Every piece of evidence. I stared at the screen for a long moment before hitting send. Part of me still wanted to stop. Still wanted to keep the peace. Then I remembered the panic of seeing a $500,000 mortgage attached to my name. The sleepless nights. The fear. The feeling of being trapped inside someone else's choices. I hit send. An hour later my lawyer replied. We start with a police report and financial fraud complaint. If they wanted this to stay a family matter, they shouldn't have committed a felony. A week later I got a call from Detective Moretti in Financial Crimes. He asked careful questions. About the forged paperwork. About the old power of attorney. About whether I had ever agreed to the mortgage in any form. I answered everything honestly. At the end of the call he paused. If this documentation checks out, he said, your parents could be facing serious charges. Pushback came 2 days later. I came home from work and found my mother standing outside my apartment holding a container of homemade soup like nothing had happened. Hi, sweetheart, she said softly. I walked past her toward my door. She followed immediately. Please don't do this, she whispered. Your father is already under enough stress. I stood outside my own apartment with my hand on the door handle while my mother tried to talk through the gap I hadn't fully opened. You forged my name on a $500,000 mortgage, I said flatly. Her expression tightened for half a second before she forced something softer. We didn't forge anything. We filled out the forms and submitted them. It was family planning. She glanced down the hallway like she expected someone to interrupt us. You know your sister, she continued quickly. She needs support. She can't do this alone. You're the only one who's ever been stable. Successful. Is this really how you want to destroy your own family? I finally looked at her properly. You already did that, I said. That landed. Her face shifted, hurt, confusion, denial all mixing together. She lifted her hands like she might reach for me, then stopped when I stepped back. You sued me, I went on. You lied in court. You tried to bury me under a debt I never agreed to. And now that there are consequences, I'm suddenly your son again. Her voice cracked. We didn't think you'd take it this far. That was the moment everything clarified. They hadn't expected resistance. Only compliance. I opened the door and stepped inside. Go home, I said. And get a lawyer. Then I closed it. That night my sister called. I almost didn't answer. I should have. But I needed to hear what version of reality she was living in. Her voice came through small, stripped of its usual confidence. I didn't know they used your documents, she said. I thought you'd agreed. Like, off the record. You thought I agreed to $500,000 of debt and just forgot about it? I don't know, Alex, she snapped suddenly. They said you were fine with it. I trusted them. They're our parents. Silence hung between us. That trust is how they get away with everything, I said finally. She exhaled sharply. They're panicking. They think it's serious now. It was serious the moment they dragged me into court. She didn't respond to that. Then quieter, are you really pressing charges? I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to say yes without hesitation. To make it clean, absolute. To draw a line I'd never cross back over. Instead I said, I'm not playing their game anymore. And I ended the call. But it wasn't over. Not even close. My lawyer called the next morning. He'd received something new from the mortgage company, a recorded call. When I got to his office, he slid the transcript across the table without a word. As I read, my stomach sank in slow motion. My father hadn't just signed papers. He had called the loan officer himself. He used my name. Answered security questions. Confirmed details. Calm, practiced, confident. Yes, the transcript read. This is Alex. I authorized the mortgage. It's for my sister. Then the final line. Can you confirm you are Alex Bradford? Yes, my father said. I am Alex Bradford. That was it. Not implied. Not misinterpreted. On record. My lawyer leaned back. We're sending this to financial crimes and the state attorney. They're already moving. I set the papers down carefully. So it's done, I said. He nodded. And for the first time I believed him. 2 weeks later, everything accelerated. The bank quietly removed my name from the mortgage. Not as an apology but as damage control. A formal acknowledgement that the entire thing violated their own policies. Then the call started. Detective Moretti this time. Warrants have been issued, he said. Your father for fraud and identity theft. Your mother for conspiracy. I didn't say anything for a moment. This won't be quiet, he added. The recording changed everything. After I hung up, my phone exploded. Relatives. Old friends. People I hadn't spoken to in years. Some angry. Some stunned. Some asking why I would do this to my family. I said the same thing every time. I didn't do this. They did. A few days later, another lawsuit arrived. Defamation. My lawyer actually laughed when he read it. Let them, he said. They're building our case for us. By the time the arraignment came, the house was already collapsing. Foreclosure notices. Frozen accounts. Isla gone from the property entirely, now living with an aunt and posting vague quotes about cutting toxic ties, like she hadn't been the reason any of this started. I went to the courthouse anyway. I needed to see it end properly. My parents sat at the front. Smaller somehow. Not physically, just less certain, like the weight of everything had finally pressed through them. When the charges were read out loud, fraud, forgery, identity theft, my father actually flinched. Their lawyer tried to frame it as a misunderstanding. A family decision gone wrong. The judge didn't blink. He impersonated the defendant on a recorded call, she said. That is not a misunderstanding. That is fraud. Bail was set. Not jail, but not freedom either. Afterward, I stepped into the hallway. My mother followed. Alex, she called, voice breaking. Please. Just talk to us. This has gone too far. I turned slowly. She looked tired. Older. Still wearing the same jewelry, like nothing had changed. You could have apologized, I said. At any point. That's all it would have taken. Her eyes filled. We were trying to protect the family. No, I said quietly. You were protecting Isla. And when I stopped being useful to that plan, I became disposable. She shook her head. We raced you. I raced myself, I said. And you tried to take that away. For a second, neither of us spoke. I don't hate you, I added. But I'm done carrying this. Then I walked out. Everything after that unraveled on its own. The house was sold by the bank. The restitution orders followed. My parents avoided prison but not consequences. Probation. Debt. Reputation gone. My father stepped down from everything. My mother stopped showing up anywhere she used to be seen. I bought a small place in the city. Nothing impressive. Just mine. No family came to the housewarming. Just a few friends and cheap food and silence that didn't feel heavy anymore. Months later, my mother texted. We miss you. Come home. Let's start over. I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned my phone off. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone a response.